Okay, and I think we are successfully live. I should get some light on in this room, get the dungeon, the lair properly lit up. Hi Shannon.
Hey, Bryce.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. It's always
Wonderful,
fun to
wonderful.
get ready to talk about a book.
Right? Yeah, well, I mean, we are doing our first ever book club here for our live hangouts. We try and do these live hangouts quarterly. And well, here we are doing this one. A listener suggested that we do a book club, so that's what we are doing. We're reviewing a book. And another listener, Aurora, recommended that we read a book by Brittney Hartley that is titled No Nonsense Spirituality, All the Tools, No Belief Required. I'm going to just read the description of this book real quick, and then we will get everything opened up and invite other people in and our patrons, of course, over at patreon.com/glassboxpod. If you want to join up participate in these hangouts and these panel discussions, you're more than welcome to. If not, you just want to watch this back, you can watch it on the YouTube, or, if you're a patron supporter, you'll get the high quality audio uploaded in a couple days after it airs. So, with that said, that's what we're doing today. This book by Brittney Hartley. It says this is the description on Amazon. It works, right? It says, in No Nonsense Spirituality, author and philosopher Britt Hartley offers a groundbreaking exploration that marries the rigor of rational inquiry with the depths of human spirituality. Best of all, no faith in the unbelievable is required. Drawing from the well springs of science, philosophy, religion, and psychology, and I would also add history, this illuminating work charts a course for those who seek a meaningful life without dogma or woo. Hartley draws on her work as an atheist spiritual director to provide practical guidelines for navigating a secular approach to ritual, morality, awe, transcendence, wisdom, community, intuition, connection, and meaning that can withstand the harsh truths of reality. With wisdom gleaned from the best of rationalism and the timeless insights of religion, no nonsense spirituality offers pathways to the good life that honor the complexity of the human experience. Engaging, thought provoking, and deeply resonant, this book invites readers to explore a new understanding of what it means to live the good life in the middle of a culture that ranges from cold skepticism to the unhealthy truth claims of religion and pseudoscience that cannot stand up to modern sensibilities. So that is, I feel like, a very apt description of this book. And I'll also add the extra angle that it's written from a former Mormon's perspective. And if you read this yourself as a former or cultural Mormon like myself, I think you get more out of the experience just because Brittney Hartley's story resonates a little bit more, or like I felt more seen, I guess I should say, within the pages of the book. But even if you don't grow up Mormon or have no Mormon attachments or leanings, this is still a really good book. This is still, like, as the title and subtitle states, it is a guide to spirituality without the necessity of believing in things that are unbelievable and woo. And I mean, overall, I really, really enjoyed this book. So I'm going to get some other people into the discussion. Shannon, what did you think about this book?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. One of the things really is that it is not Mormon centric. There's several books I've read of from people where they're talking about leaving their religion, and it's very centric to Mormonism, and so they don't appeal to those outside of Mormonism. Whereas this one, she did really well at coming at it from the direction of how to leave a religion. And that I appreciated because I was like, it's not, it's too, it would be too close spread, wouldn't be as widespread, I guess you should say, otherwise. And so that was one of the best parts to me. But I also liked how right there in chapter 2, secular spirituality, she says she likes the perspective that describes religion is how we orient ourselves in the universe. And right there, that's when I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting where she goes with this. But so yeah, that was something I did appreciate about it. But I'm also like hoping to have more people talk than just me. I told Bryce this earlier today when we were recording the episode that drops tomorrow, because I was like, I'm going to try not to do all the talking on this live stream this time. All the time I get on here and I'm like, wow, I'm going to talk. There's a whole room full of people. I'm just going to blab my mouth off the whole time. And then afterwards, I'm like, God, Shannon, you really should have shut up because you wanted to hear what they said. And so I especially am like hoping that Aurora takes this over because you recommended the book. And I'm like putting you way on the spot with this, Aurora. So I hope you don't mind.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I first found Brittney Hartley on TikTok. She made videos, and a lot of her videos really resonated with me because like I yearned for spirituality, but I also was too skeptical to like buy into different things. And I was very wary, of course, just different religions after leaving Mormonism, but even like astrology, and I'm just like, okay, so I just don't buy into any of that. Um, but at the same time, like my mom, she's an energy worker, she's a Reiki master. And I'm like, but I also know that some of that actually helps. But at the same time, I could say the same thing about like prayer helped me when I was Mormon. And so it's like, but I don't necessarily believe there was a God there, right, listening to me. Um, and so I feel like this book really is really for people like me who is looking for spirituality or connectiveness, whatever you want to call it. But also you don't, you're too skeptical, you're too rational to like buy into those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then when she published the book, I wanted to read it, and I was slowly reading it, and then I sped through it to get ready for this book discussion.
Well, why don't we tackle that a little bit? Because I mean, that's one thing I super appreciate about her approach to the entire thing, and coming to it is like there are things that are beneficial in the more like woo and the more like things that are quote unquote spiritual. And she even like deals with like how laden that term is and like spiritualism and belief and like how heavy these terms are and how like like how they are used culturally in religious contexts and like what other words do we have to use. I think that's a direct line she said, like what other words do we have here? But
Yeah.
like that she seems to appreciate that there are like aspects of those beliefs that are helpful, that can be very spiritually healthy. And that's like in ritualism, whether that's like your morning routine getting ready for work, or whether that's like meditation or whatever it is, that like she recognizes that these can be beneficial, that they just don't need to come with all of the extra woo stuff, right? I really love that about this.
Yeah. I was thinking, reading this, I was reminded back to that episode, I forget which number it was, where we talked about the feelings of the spirit, about the frisson that you feel and what actually causes that. And this is why you feel it when you see, fantastic artwork or something in a film or the right music or whatever, because it approaches a different part of you, that emotional part of you in a certain way. And I think that is part of spirituality in the use of that word. But that, it doesn't negate it, understanding the science behind it. It just means you have, oh God, who's this coming in? Sorry. Okay. Anyway, sorry. See the name of somebody coming in saying all nonsense spirituality. Good. Okay. Anyway, sorry. I'm just totally distracted. Okay. But understanding those feelings, but also understanding that they are real. We just need to see them in a different way, to see that they come from yourself rather than an outward being. And so, because like with prayer, like you brought up with praying helps you. Yes, it does, because I mean, the way I've thought of it for a long time now is what praying is just like a meditation where you are speaking to yourself, but you're calming your mind so that you can remember things. It's like people say, yeah, I prayed and then I remembered where I left my keys. Well, yeah, because you calmed your mind and your brain was able to get everything to percolate back up and remind you where you last left them because you're the one who put them there, those kind of things. And so that's one thing is nice to see, is somebody bringing in the science of it all to explain that, yes, those are real feelings. It's just not somebody else controlling them. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what I have when I was like, I stopped believing in Mormonism, and like Christianity fell away with that at the same time, but I kept believing in God, and eventually that kind of transformed, and now I'm like, I think there's like a connectiveness with all of us, but at the same time, like I don't know, but like that I concluded that like when I was talking with God, it was really just my inner self. And when I was getting guided on like, oh, what should I do next in my life, my big decision, it was just my own intuition deep down telling me what I should do. And that's why a lot of times it worked out. Like there was one time anyway, I don't want to get into that, but that because sometimes, our intuition can still lead us astray, or not on path that's good. But yeah, there was just a lot of good chapters, and I'm trying to remember them all because
yeah.
Well, I mean, kind of within what you're talking about here, or I one part in the book that she talked about that I appreciated was like engaging in some of these practices, just recognizing that it's causing you to think differently about something. I like one of the examples that I remember was when she was talking about tarot readings, like using tarot readings in order to like cause you to think about something from a different perspective. That can be kind of its own meditative thing, its own kind of its own way of thinking.
Yeah, kind of like prayer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I've now been thinking about buying a tarot deck, and it's because of this book and her. And I'm like, I don't actually believe that it would actually, it's not magical. It doesn't actually work, but it can still tap into something inside you and help you come to terms with things, think things through.
Yes. One thing I found interesting was when she was talking about atheism and that what the feelings people have about death when they start thinking everything just ends when you die, and that whole feeling of, well, what's the point of anything, to acceptance, to whatever. And that's something I've literally faced death about 7 times now, and so that's something I find interesting now as an atheist, as averse to as a Mormon, because I have realized that I'm not afraid of it like I used to be. And I'm always interested in talking to other people about it for just to find out what their feelings are, because to me, it's like, it makes it easier to live in the moment rather than, am I doing enough for what happens next life? Whereas as a Mormon, you're terrified all the way up to the end. Did I do enough to get into exaltation? Am I actually going to make it there? I mean, we've got prophets and apostles saying that right before they die. I don't know if I did enough. Did I repent enough? Did I do enough work? Did I, I mean, like Holland, this last conference was like, I still got work to do. And I'm like, dude, you really can't sit down and just sit. You're on dialysis, for fuck's sake, So anyway, it's like, it changes your whole perspective. And I like how she dealt with it in the book, where she's saying, she's letting you know basically that these feelings you have, whatever they are all useful and valid feelings. And that's okay to work through how you feel about it. Yeah. And so I'm curious, with any of you, did it change things with you leaving Mormonism? What you think about death?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I felt like one of my aunts died, I don't know how many years ago, but she died in a car accident. She was kind of like my second mom, because I went to Italy with her family. Anyway, they lived closer, so we spent more time with them, and a lot of times I would be talking with her when we went over rather than my cousins, although sometimes I did things with them too. But so I was really close with my aunt, and she died, and I had to grieve her death. But then when I stopped believing in an afterlife, I had to grieve her death, like for real. It felt really different. And then the day this book came out, a couple days before my grandpa had died, and Brittney was doing some like Q&A stuff, and I asked about like how to deal with death, because I'm just struggling right now. And I would say I feel like the book is more helpful in how to deal with your own death rather than how to deal with someone that you love's death. Like you're like, oh, I still miss my grandpa, right? Like that's not going to change.
Right.
And anyway, but at the same time, like I don't believe he's in a bad place, so it's not like I fear for him. I just miss him.
Right. Right. Because that's also interesting too. If you're coming as an atheist to somebody who's not and has the beliefs of the afterlife, has beliefs of all of, they're moving on to the next step, is how do you deal with them talking to them? Because I just don't feel like it's at all useful to push atheism on them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so it's like I don't feel like it's useful to say to them, well, when you die, you're done and it's over. And because I think they have what they feel. It's like what Shelley was talking about in our interview with her, where she's telling of her parents and her mother's death, and that the feelings that she had, and recognizing those were real feelings for her mother, and that her mother was feeling about dying and about what was going to happen and all that stuff. And it's like that is something very well, and it goes back to also what um Hartley says in the book about when you leave religion, you also leave the community and you lose that community. And that's all part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I seem to remember when she was within the context of that talking about like nothing does community quite like religion does. And like there's no secular replacement for all of that.
It's not.
Um, and but I mean I kind of appreciate the approach that she brought with that like chapter on like secular morality and like removing that from like dictates and dogmatic prescriptions. Let me think. I'm trying to see if I have a quote from that chapter. I did not pull a quote from that. I have a whole bunch of quotes from just like stuff that spoke to me. I was like, oh, this is great. I mean, she's a great writer. But that, like, I'm glad that she spent an entire chapter focusing just on how to have secular morality, and that when you leave religion and embrace atheism, that doesn't mean that everything is all hedonism. And like, now you just have to like find your own sense of morality and like in intuition. I thought that was a really helpful chapter as well.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I really like that chapter. There's a time after I left. My mom actually has been pretty supportive of me, but she was asking me like, "Oh, what are your values?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know anything. Like, I don't have any values." And she's like, "That's not true." And because she could see that I still valued things and that I left partly because I valued things like honesty um and of course I've had to spend time figuring out what I actually value versus what the church told me to value.
Mhm.
And some of the things overlap, like there's things I was taught to value in Mormonism that actually led me out because I was like, you guys aren't living up to what you claim. Um, but it's that like right when you leave, you're like, oh well, the religion told me that this is the only framework for morality. And so I guess I don't have anything. Um, but then you're like, oh, I can build up something and it's still morality. It's just a different foundation instead of like God, I believe it's good because God tells me I believe it's good because of the good it is for society and for our communities.
Right.
And so in that way it seems better, but I know a lot of people who believe in God will be like, "Oh, if I stopped believing in God, I'd become a murderer." I'm like, "No, you wouldn't. Like you probably believe that's wrong." And I'm like I have better faith in them than they do in themselves. But
That's my favorite. And I love it when you hear from people like Matt Dillahunty, who's like, yes, I murder as many people as I want now, which is none. God.
Yeah, I mean, like, morality isn't actually all that hard, and like, I mean, this is a sentiment that was in the book, but is shared among many atheists, prominent atheists and communicators of like, like humans didn't create, or like religion, God didn't create humans, humans created gods, and all
Yeah.
of the disagreements among all of the gods and everything. It's I really appreciate kind of that approach of like, finding and divining your own morality is, I mean, in many ways it is instinctual. It comes from within you. Like the religion, codifies these things and makes them rigid and non-dynamic. And we have to kind of divine our own intuition, our own sense of morality, apart from these things once we kind of leave the religious side of this.
Yeah.
And sorry, I was making that comment while also distracted, letting somebody else into the chat and also reading the YouTube comments. So I got really distracted. I apologize. Thus the meandering comment.
Oh, yes. Nickname for Bryce would be Old Brother Bacon Bagels. Yes, it would.
Yeah.
That and
So
Blankenagel. Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
Black Angel. That was fun one. So I remember telemarketer phone calls that would try and pronounce your last name. Hello, is Mr. or Mrs. Black Angel there? I remember being a kid answering those. Anyway,
Yes.
Julie, you've commented just a tiny bit. Do you have overall thoughts, overall takeaways, impressions from the book?
I thought it was really good. Yeah, I thought what it had to say about women and spirituality was really good. Like the page where she's like, well, I learned this good thing from this institution or this man, but he wasn't so good about women and the institution wasn't so good. Yeah, so yeah, I thought it was really helpful. I liked it.
Yeah, that one was
Yeah.
my favorite chapter too, the awakening the feminine.
Chapter 6. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good that I want to just send that chapter to my mom and be like, I know she's ex-Mormon, but please read this one chapter because it's wonderful.
Especially her thing of we've long forgotten in Western society when God was a woman.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there was one guy she mentioned that actually had people die who practice his thing.
Yeah.
Will Hoff.
Yeah.
So you still have to be careful.
For sure. Yes.
Yeah, he did like water things and like being freezing. And like people, like multiple people drowned.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much.
That's scary.
Yes.
I listened to a podcast episode on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good times. Ugh.
Yeah, and then that was a discussion was pretty interesting to me because I just like binge watched a show about archaeologists in Egypt, and it's like super interesting to like get that perspective from a civilization that was so big, lasted for 1,000 years, and then just died off. And like I just like left with the thoughts like, yeah, all those gods that they took as really important are dead now. The only difference between like the pharaoh and this regular person that was buried right now is that the pharaoh has a lot of shit with him. That's like like so like what matters. So I've been pondering that question.
Right.
Like
very
Excellent.
cool.
yeah, and she kind of answers that like what matters is like alleviating suffering for people and making things as best as we can right now. So
that's really a big difference between religion and not religion. Is what it comes down to, I think, is whether you're relieving suffering now with everything you're trying to make the world a better place now, or are you living for the next life? Wanting the apocalypse to happen now so it's done and over with. Yeah. And she does say that quite a few times.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is partly why like religious people won't care about the environment, is because they're like, oh well, God will take care of it. I don't have to do anything.
Right.
And it's really frustrating because I was starting to be an environmentalist as Mormon, and one of my teachers who got me there was also Mormon, and he wrote a whole thing about how Mormons should be environmentalists because it matches the scriptures, how we're supposed to take care of the earth,
Yeah.
and how like, but it's frustrating because like everyone at church will like be like adamantly opposed to it because they're like, oh, God will take care of it. We don't have to do anything.
Mhm.
And that's where religion can make good people become like just not do anything when they potentially would have otherwise.
Mhm. Well, and how often in Mormonism were we told, oh, don't give money to the beggar on the street, give it as a fast offering. Don't do this, donate it to the church. Over and over and over. Don't help this shelter, go donate to the church, because then you'll actually do some good. Whereas, how much of that is actually doing good?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
she kind of makes that point. Like these rituals that religion has, we think they're doing good,
Mhm.
but they're not. Like I
Right.
thought of fasting.
Yes.
Our Mormons think that does a lot of good, but it doesn't.
Yeah. Fast
It just makes a
offerings.
lot of people hangry.
Yes, it does. And then you got kids in there wishing that we got a whole slice of bread for the sacrament, not just a little piece.
That was
Yeah,
me.
that was always me. And I was like, why can't we have juice? Why not juice? Why does it have to be water?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yes.
So we also
Yes.
have joined up on the panel too, Roy and Will. So welcome to both of you. If either of you have thoughts on this book, feel free to jump in, chime in, interject. Any thoughts, any takeaways, any favorite parts, favorite chapters, anything like that. I put it out there as a blanket
You want to go?
statement.
You want to go first, Roy, or? He's got to find the unmute. I'll go. I bought the book, and I was sad that it wasn't audiobook. But then Aurora had like posted a link on the Patreon, and so because I had like not read it, I was like, this is like my tag since I bought the audiobook and I'm like 60% of the way through it. But if you followed Britt Hartley on TikTok or anything, or her she had what was the Go Real podcast she had, Almost Awakened.
Yep.
And so if you followed any of that, a lot of the content is very similar to what she's kind of just been preaching. Well, I shouldn't use that word. What she's been saying publicly, right? And what I like about it is it definitely like captures the experience that I went through. I think this is, can we like kind of critique the book a little bit? I don't know if this
Yes.
is a real critique, but like one of the things that Britt does as a pretend guru, because she says that, right? Like I'm not trying to like, okay, I I know because I've talked with Britt once. I reached out to her online and was kind of like trying to explain like these people, that moon finger analogy where like I don't know if it's like Buddha or whatever, but they're basically saying like these enlightened leaders, they point to the moon and everyone gets stuck looking at the finger, right? To me, she's a moon pointer. She like in her own language as she tries to translate it out, um, the vision she sees. I can kind of compare it with the one that we're all constructing together because I listen to this podcast and you guys like we're all co-regulating in a way. And anyways, so what I really like, or the critique that I have, sorry, is that she talks about the dark night of the soul as kind of like a rite of passage, and I don't I wanted to really just ask y'all this question is like, do you think that 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 could technically like turn into somebody's like thinking like, oh, I have to go through a dark night of soul. It's like my baptism. Because I remember like on my mission, like trying to reconstruct the Enos story of like praying all night and or even just like the getting the Alma story where you're like getting forgiveness of your sins. Like I would try to reconstruct that in my head a lot as I was going through my Mormon spiritual journey. And then just as she's because that was a profound part of her experience, and that's who she's trying to speak to when she communicates. But I don't know if that's a requirement for a spiritual life or not. And I just wanted to hear y'all's opinion on that. Did that make sense?
Mhm.
There's a lot of rambling there, but
Well, yeah, like she a lot of times calls it like the void of nihilism. And I don't know, I don't remember if she explained it in the book, but I have heard her say that like you can get to be like an optimistic nihilist without going into the void of nihilism. Because I feel like I'm where I'm like, I don't think life has inherent meaning, but I think life's has the meaning we give it, and I think that's beautiful. But I haven't ever like faced nihilism like the way she's talked about it. Um, so, and when she on her at least socials, she talks about that you don't have to. I don't know if she got that across in the book.
Right.
But yeah, I could see someone thinking that, oh, now I have to put myself in a dark place to become more spiritual, and that could be problematic.
I don't think it is required because I think
No.
that it's like with the grieving process. Everybody goes through grief in their own way because this process out is basically like grieving. And so it just depends on what you as a person need at that moment. You might not need that. You might not have to go through that. Pilgrim's Progress is written the way it is, but it doesn't mean that everyone who's going through the same thing as the pilgrim is going to go through all the same things as the pilgrim to get to that point. And so it's more a case of each person is going to be individualized in how they go through it all. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when she's describing it, what she's more talking about is like population trends, that it often is the case that when people fall out of a system of spiritualism that they know or that they're born into or that, speaks to their truths, that when they're left with a void there, that's kind of often where they'll go to is like atheistic nihilism, and that's a cold, hard, and a difficult place for a lot of people to be, especially if like for a lot of Mormons, when you leave the church, like the whole safety net, your whole social group, everything just falls out from under you, and that it's very easy to get lost into very pessimistic nihilism. But I feel like she articulated optimistic nihilism very well throughout the book, because that's my underpinning philosophy, and like I felt like it was very well represented, and she communicated it in a way that was very appealing to me. Like the way I try and talk about nihilism is like there's the oh nobody gives a shit, but and then there's like oh nobody gives a shit meme, right? Like that's how I love to approach nihilism, and I feel like she did articulate that quite well throughout the book.
Yeah.
yeah. I see what you guys are saying. I also think it's good though for her to kind of anchor to that a little bit, because I feel like just with how much my kids and I see other kids, they're kind of developing this dual relationship with the real world and the internet. If they're going to be in a dark place, I would want them to find content that like Britt makes, and because it's quality stuff and it's helped me. So I guess I don't mind if she kind of owns that Dark Night of the Soul in terms of her brand.
Yeah. Well, it's
Because
good too
somebody,
that
you
she
got to
talks
catch
about it.
them. Like
Yeah.
if the kids, yeah.
Well, and for kids especially too, because especially teenagers, because everything they feel is times 25 because everything is just huge, everything's changing, all of that. So their feelings are massive. Their emotions are out of control, all those kind of things. And to have somebody in authority like her speaking up about those kind of things, and it validates it for the other person, saying, okay, this is normal what I'm feeling. Okay, and this is how you work through it. This is what you do. And so, yeah, those kind of things are particularly good to talk about.
Yeah.
'Cause some of the biggest problems we have in society were always caused by less information.
Mhm.
She also has a Gen Z spirituality guide, like course. It's a bunch of videos that she recorded, specifically targeted to teenage kids. I was looking for it because I got teenage kids now, so
Yes, you do. And that's a whole new breed. Yeah. Once you get through it, it's just easier. Just, I'll have you know.
that's good to know.
Teenage years are just hard. Yes. And that's the
Uh,
time that parents need to remember they were once teenagers, and they remember what it was like and that you would never, ever, ever go back to being that. Yeah. Anyway, that was a tangent. Shannon went on one, as always.
I mean, the first of many, hopefully. So actually one of the, I mean, kind of dovetailing off of that portion of the conversation, I one of the chapters I thought, or the two chapters that I really enjoyed was chapter 9 and 10. That's intuition and the occult and mysticism and wisdom traditions. And where I enjoyed it so much is like I love how that she just kind of throughout the entire book she interweaves little tidbits of history in order to provide a little bit of context of what she's describing. And she's not belabored with it. She doesn't like get lost in the weeds of, you know, historical spiritualistic movements and everything, but she tells us just enough to give us a little more context to fully understand what she's saying. And I thought that those two chapters where kind of where a central thesis that she seems to be making throughout the entire book are kind of best presented. And that's the like finding spiritual fulfillment in all sorts of things, right? And like I remember she opens the occult chapter on like talking about people who find like significance in numbers or times of day or like you know like all of the little signs that people are looking for as signs of God or whatever. And that like for some people those can be like if that's what you're looking for, then that is, you know, it can be spiritually beneficial to view the world through those lenses. It's just when those things become like the ruling aspects of our personality, that's when those like spiritual pursuits kind of lead us down, you know, woo paths, basically a lot of woo within those traditions. And like, you know, we did that episode on numerology, right? Because like it's fun and it's a way that some number of people view the world, is that every single number has significance. And she's like, yeah, some people do. And that's just cool. Who cares? If that's what they get spiritual fulfillment out of, then more power to them. I really appreciated kind of that, like all of the occult stuff, all of like the meditative practices and like the Wicca practices and like the other aspects of mysticism. I like as someone who doesn't believe in all of that, the way that she wrote about that, I thought was quite helpful, quite beautiful. And like, yeah, it's okay to like think about numerology every so often when you can't help but notice it.
Yeah. How many times they say 27? Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
It's Judith number of times. Sorry, go ahead.
I liked with the mysticism and wisdom traditions chapter that she was talking about like um she talked about like three different mysticisms, Jesus, Buddha, and forget who else. But I liked how she's kind of, it's like we can gain wisdom from their stories, even if their stories aren't true in the like strictest sense. It's like, okay, maybe that story about Jesus isn't exactly, might not have happened, but what can we learn from it? Um, and I think that can be helpful for people who've like potentially left religion, is like what I can gain stuff from other religions that I've never been part of. But also there's still like benefits, like there's still like particularly Jesus, I feel like his stories resonate more with me than say some other aspects of the Bible that are, there's some that are very problematic. But where you're like, okay, I don't have to necessarily believe that it's true to see like how it's helpful. And also she treats the stories of Jesus the same way she's treating the other religious stories too.
Right.
There was one point in that it's at the beginning, and I had to search the chapter to find it. But one thing that I really appreciated about her approach in mysticism is like the role of skeptics in it. And it was either in this chapter or it might have been like the last chapter of the book where she talked about like how skepticism is very useful because everybody brings all of their ideas to the table, and then skepticism has a way of clearing the nonsense and the useless stuff off of the table. And I was like, yeah, skeptics are, it's like they're a bunch of cats. Exactly. I get it. But this is the quote that I was looking for in it. And she says, what wisdom traditions do that I love and why I think more skeptics should hang out in these places is that they have the experience without doing the therefore insert truth claim. They simply value the experience. It could be loving kindness meditation that opens your heart and changes your day, singing with people, reading a holy book, and your intuition resonated with something, sitting in a drum circle, doing yoga outdoors, planning a summer solstice meal with friends, or going on a walk with your dog. God, this word we use for these profound experiences and stages of consciousness, becomes a way of life rather than a theology one uses to keep others out of heaven. And that contextualized the whole mysticism and like the more wooey spiritualism in a way that it's like you can be a skeptic and you can still play in these spaces and tour them and live in these spaces, and just you don't have to accept all of the woo stuff that comes along with it. I appreciate that approach so much. As someone who loves to tour in wooey spaces and spends time in the world of psychedelia, which is replete with woo and mysticism and astrology and deeper meanings and signs and everything, like I love touring those places. I just, I just don't believe, like I get lost when someone says this and this and this, I saw this and this and this, and therefore that. And I'm like, all right, I don't need the therefore. I'm just here to have fun. I'm enjoying this experience. And like we can share this human bond, this human connections, all sitting in this drum circle tripping. It's great.
There you go. Yeah.
Oh, I was just thinking of like the guided meditation she has.
Yeah.
Like I did that, and it also kind of taught me that it's like, okay, when you talk with someone, maybe it's your grandma, maybe it's your whoever, that can be a useful practice, even if you're not actually talking to the real person. And I love how she's just like, think of all the people, like the heroes in your life, whether they're real people, historical, fictional, and like clearly bringing in fictional shows that like you're not actually connecting to their energy. It's all in your own head.
Right.
And like, so it's like you're like, I know I'm talking to myself, but it feels different than if I were to try to talk to myself.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why prayer is useful sometimes.
Very much.
It gives you that.
Yeah. I think it was within that same area where she was talking about manifesting and like people using manifestations to like, and affirmations and like how those can be useful. And she used the clinical terminology for it. And I cannot remember the exact terminology, but like when you're doing manifesting, you're essentially just like focusing on positive mentality and positive thinking. You're not actually influencing the universe to actually change and make life better for you. You are just focusing your mind intentionally meditating on positive outcomes for things that you have an active role in shaping. Like that was one thing, like there's somebody in my family who is like very big on like manifestations, and like we chat a lot, and she talks about like every morning, part of her morning ritual is like her repeating her manifestings and like her saying all of the things that she wants in life, and then lo and behold, eventually almost all of those things come true, and the things that don't come true that she's trying to manifest, those kindly get forgotten and never to be repeated or remembered ever again. The things that do actually come true, it's like that proves that the manifestations are actually working for her. But there's something, I mean, like you're saying, Julie, like in prayer, in meditative spaces, in these things, and like Aurora, you're saying the guided meditation that she had in there, like these can be useful to us even if we don't believe in the higher transcendent kind of wooey aspects of these things. Like even if it's just to get you to think differently about a current problem in your life, or to try and see somebody with a different kind of compassion, or to, whether that's praying to Luke Skywalker to give you strength to forgive your father, whatever that is, right? Like we can do these things. It's fine. It's okay. And like giving ourselves license to do these things that, atheists generally are going to be repelled by or see as just, nonsense or whatever.
Very true. Did anybody go through the discussion and journal questions when you were reading?
I read them. I didn't really have much time to like spend on them, but there was a few that like popped out to me. Like one was that actually I've been trying to change plans and plan for things. So it was like, what would you do in your life if you knew you couldn't fail? And I instantly thought, oh, I'd get a master's in history. But of course, it's not as simple as that. But now I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to see if this is possible. Mostly it's the money that's keeping me away. But I'm trying to see if I can make that work, because I'm like, there's a reason that popped first into my head. It wasn't just completely random. But I do want to go back to the journal questions and potentially pick out a few more that I want to think on. And it's probably one reason why I'm going to revisit this book too. And even if I just revisit the journal questions.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know if it's just, this is probably just it coming from my own kind of take, my own, like the baggage that I'm bringing to reading this book. But anytime I'm reading a book and the chapters end with like discussion prompts, it feels like a self-help book in the worst negative connotation of self-help book ever. But like every one of those, like, I mean, I was listening to the audiobook of it and I was like, oh, this actually is a great summary. These are just, question by question format of summarizing the entire previous chapter. That's actually really helpful. I really like the discussion portions at the end of all the chapters. So, and a few of them, like, I didn't like spend time and like meditate on each of the questions, but a few of them, like, I paused the audiobook after those discussion questions were presented and just like, what do I think about that? Struggling to remember any of those instances right now, but I actually enjoyed that. I'm glad that she included those to help me kind of like refocus and let my mind kind of, rewind everything that it had just consumed the previous chapter.
That makes sense. I was going through too fast to really look at those. So yeah, go ahead, Roy. Will.
Oh, Bryce, I was gonna say I had the same thought of like, this is just like any self-help book that's out there. I like, before I could really finish the thought, I was like, yeah, but this one's like real because she's so close to the community that I'm aware of, that like it definitely just feels like, oh, her this is actually good self-help because it's like from a friend. Like, and I'm not, there's some like parasocial stuff there because I just see her on the podcast, but like she's in tune with the community of ex-Mormons, and so she speaks it really well. So yeah, it's a self-help book, but it's like one made closer to a community of people that it's beneficial to have that type of help.
Right.
Can we use that as a kind of a springboard to discuss the positioning of this book and like who is it for? Because like I feel like for myself, this book was like tailor written for my like spiritual walk. Like my path growing up in the church, leaving the church, angry atheist, nihilist, optimistic nihilist, to live and let live personality. Like it completely felt like it followed my trajectory, and like the book was written to speak to my demographic very well. And does it speak to other demographics? Like, is there more than just the ex-Mormon atheist perspective that is valuable within this book?
I think it could be valuable to people who are religious, but they would have to be open-minded that they're going to be reading a book that claims that what they believe isn't true. Which that doesn't mean they have to like take that, but that like, okay, there's a reason why I want to give like that at least that one chapter to my mom, even though she's still Mormon. It's because she does things in the other aspects of spirituality that a lot of Mormons think are like evil or satanic, or at least not real, that she embraces, that obviously makes her a unique Mormon in that like she won't talk about certain things when she's at church because she said people will just give her weird looks or because as I said, she's a Reiki master. And I do remember the TikTok where Hartley was talking about Reiki, and she's just like, there's signs to show that it works. We don't know why it works. So I was like, huh, I'm glad to hear that, because in my experience, I've seen that Reiki helped me. But at the same time, I'm still kind of skeptical about some of the things my mom does. So I think it could help people who are spiritual, like religious, sorry, not just spiritual. But they have to be, if they're super close-minded, they're not gonna get any benefit from this book. It'll just make them angry.
Yeah. But then again, would they actually read it?
I don't think so.
Yeah. And I think the audience really is those leaving a religion. And so you're not going to, I mean, if you get somebody who wants to stay in their religion reading it, usually it's to read it to find out all the things wrong with it so they can tell the other person who was using it to help them leave a religion, all the ways that they're wrong. And so, that's really the thing with the audience, because it felt to me, but see, this I would want to hear from somebody who isn't, who's a nevermo, who's never been a Mormon, is I felt like it would actually help somebody from any religion trying to leave it and help them to understand what feelings they're going to feel and they are feeling and how to work through them to get to where they feel it's right. Because it just, I mean, it shows, yes, we do need, a lot of us need ritual in what we're doing. A lot of us need this feeling and we need this feeling and this, and any of these are good if you just go at the right attitude and you're not letting somebody else control it in you. And so, yeah.
I mean, I kind of have a similar conclusion, but a different way of thinking about it, in like the positioning of this and the target audience, because I think that like a believing Mormon, an Orthodox Mormon, handed this book as a Christmas gift, breaks it open and starts reading, I think that they'll probably be far more offended at how anti-patriarchy the book is and how antagonistic the book is towards patriarchal religions than
Yeah.
than they would be have a problem with the way that other forms of spiritualism and religion are presented, right? And I appreciated that approach from Hartley, because I like that resonates so much with me. Like taking the sexist institutions to task for their sexist structures, like that is unacceptable. Like we cannot have these institutions continuing to have so much control over society. That resonates so much with me. I think that is what probably turns the Orthodox believing button seat Mormon away from a book like this. And probably the majority of people who are of any of like the Abrahamic faith traditions who might consume this just on a lark, that it's probably the most offensive in that regard, because it does kind of attack the underpinnings of those religions, which is a male, bearded God standing up in the sky. But I think if able to get over those hurdles, I think what the book could likely accomplish is a person reading this who ascribes to one faith tradition, one religion, seeing that people who are in all of these other faith traditions also get spiritual fulfillment out of what they're doing. Regardless of how fervently they believe in their professed God, that doesn't matter. They are getting spiritual fulfillment out of the rituals or the practices or out of the community or whatever is offered by their religion, which may cause standard Orthodox believers of Mormon stripe or any other stripe to maybe open their mind a little bit and be like, hey, maybe there are things in other spiritual pursuits that are actually useful, like, Reiki or yoga or any of these things. Like there are, you can get spiritual fulfillment outside of just like, singing hymns every Sunday and taking the sacrament.
Yeah.
I do also wonder how people who've never been religious would respond to this book. I think people who've left other religions would respond well. But people who've never been religious, I wonder if there's some of it that they just wouldn't resonate with because they just hadn't left religion until they have a different life experience. Part of me thinks that it still would be useful, since I do think people yearn for spirituality, and I think that's why we see the children of some atheists go join religions. It's not just like because they believe that's true, but it's because they're yearning for something a little bit more.
Also would help them understand people who have left religion, but yeah, that is true. I hadn't thought about that. Somebody who grew up atheist. That would be an interesting thing to have somebody read it and give their thoughts on it. Yeah. That's not something I run into around here. 30 minutes from Temple Square. Yeah.
You know, that actually makes me want to see if my partner would read this, because she grew up totally non-religious, and you know, we share books, audiobooks all the time, and I wonder if this is something that she might actually enjoy, because like, you know, there is a fair amount of material for ex-Mormons in this book, but there's a lot of material that is completely sans anything Mormon, that there's something for everybody in here. So I'm really curious what her thought might be on all of this too, because she's someone who doesn't engage in any kind of spiritual things, right? She has like physical activities that she does as hobbies, but like she doesn't do any like prayer or any meditation or any like, you know, any of these typical spiritual things, no woo anything. She totally rejects anything that's woo. And yeah, so I don't know. That would be really interesting to get her take on this. I should,
Yes, it would.
I'll ask her to see what she thinks about it,
Yeah.
about listening to this. Anyway, so I digress.
Yeah.
Julie, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to chime in? Oh, and now you're muted, I think.
Slightly, no, I just unmuted for some reason.
Okay. All right. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Let's see. Another one of the notes that I have, or not another one, but one of the notes that I have, that I thought was an interesting concept. If this is in chapter 7, where she talked about anarchist calisthenics. And this is I'll just read this quote and we can maybe use this as another jump off point. But she says, the concept of purposefully breaking some trivial law that makes no sense, even if it's only jaywalking. That way, when it comes to making big decisions that cut against the grain of the norms of society, you're fit for the task. You have to build up a tolerance of other people's opinions so you realize what other people actually think of you doesn't kill you. And I enjoyed that because like I think there's a bit of like the coming out of the Mormon tradition there, and like being scared of disappointing family and disappointing friends, and like rejecting a rule that is put in place via, you know, via culture or your parents or whoever is causing or making you go to church or whatever, and like having to practice like getting the sense of the feeling of rejecting a rule or rejecting an authority figure, and having to like practice that. It's something that requires practice. And like, you know, Shannon, I see it all the time with you interjecting into panel discussions that we do. Like that is a skill that you have had to exercise, because it's part of the same thing, that like there is an implicit rule and you're saying, no, I don't agree with this implicit rule, be that the men are talking, therefore the men should be the ones who are talking, or be that I'm not going to go to church anymore, or be that I'm going to jaywalk because I don't want to walk down to the sidewalk, or, you know, I'm going to, this anarchism, like little acts of anarchism to help train our minds to be able to deal with that feeling that we have inside when we're rejecting an authority structure. I just love that part of this book.
That's
Yeah, you really have to go through that when you leave Mormonism. Because I remember like going to church and like fast Sunday, you have to like remember, oh, accidentally getting a drink in the drinking fountain, like, oh, did anybody see me? It's fast Sunday. Like having like conditioning yourself to like not care about what people think.
Very much.
That's such a big thing.
Yeah, that's a very good point, especially with what gets trained into you. Because I mean, for me, I didn't leave until, 2015. spent 40 plus years in the church, and there's a lot of things that got beaten out of me as an adult. And so even just things like speaking up as a woman took a hell of a lot of effort to be able to do. And even just this last couple of years on a panel I was on, it was hard. It was really hard as the only woman on the panel to speak up and say, you know what? Hey, I'm still talking, you know, and just to keep talking and not let them interrupt me and stop me. That took me months to be able to do. And, you know, those kind of things. And so it takes a lot of effort, a lot of work to train that out of yourself, you know, this training that you've been given. And so, yes, she's right on that. And because I think that, but I also think that works both ways, that whole anarchist thing, because there are things you get in a religion where they want you to stand out as a peculiar people. And Mormons aren't the only ones to do this. Pretty much all religions do this in some way or another. Just Mormons have a word for it. But they want you to stand out as your religion. And so what others will see as wrong or as weird, you do and you take pride in doing. And so it's just learning how to switch that to leave the religion is also a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I've more with social norms, but like trying to, because like religions and Mormonism particularly like tries to control how you look and what you dress. And so dressing how I want, like, sure, I know we're shorter shorts than Mormons would say is okay. I show my porn shoulders. But also I cut my hair on my side, partly just to shake off the control that society has. It's not just Mormonism, but society as a whole. But also like I decided to wear mismatched socks some days just to like, it's a little bit uncomfortable at times. But you're like, hey, if I can do this, I can do other things that are more important, but take control back into my own life.
This one's me shaving my head last year. It was, I loved doing it. I mean, that was one of the few things I liked when I went through cancer treatment, was being bald. But last year, but then I had to go through everyone asking me what kind of cancer I had. And so it was a weird thing. I was like, yeah, women in their 50s who look like me don't generally shave their heads on purpose. So yeah, that was fun. But yeah, I see what you mean. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
There's another discussion prompt I have here, and this is also from chapter 7, and this actually goes to something that you were talking about, Will, about Hartley kind of being like a moon pointer, I think you said. Because she had talked about Tolstoy and his exile and him living kind of like as an ascetic, well, here's just a quote, and I wonder if we can kind of use this as the discussion prompt to like, um, is Hartley successfully accomplishing the like pointing us on the path of philosophy, or is she trying to teach us a philosophy? Because those are two very different things. So this quote says, his path is now called Tolstoyism, which is an emphasis on Christian anarchy, vegetarianism, and love for all things. He lived another 30 years in this place where even though life had its challenges, he no longer had to keep rope out of the house. She was talking about pessimistic nihilism at the time, too. The point isn't to convert you to join Tolstoyism, but to create your own ism that sustains you even in the face of suffering. This is what true teachers and mystic wisdom masters do. They don't convert you to their path, they point you to seek what they sought and create what they created in your own unique way. So for me, and kind of in the context of what you were talking about, Will, that very much spoke to me as if she is describing the moon and not just pointing to it, right? Like she's clearly trying to tell us that, like, hey, I'm just telling you about all of these different faith structures, and with the whole point of like, you just take this information in and make it your own idea, your own identity, your own philosophy, your own approach to life. And that's what true philosophy really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I see it. And I feel like in the beginning she says like, don't take any of this as, I'm not going to be your guru, whatever. Like she kind of says like, look, you're going to get a philosophy that's from me, but like I'm talking about something else, which is something you can create for yourself. And so if you read the book and skip that part, you could easily, well, not easily, but I could see somebody getting caught up in thinking that the book contains the way to live. But I think in the beginning, what she says is like, this is something you get to find out, and this is how a lot of people do it. To pretend
Yeah.
there's this one line in there where she's like, become a walking piece of art. That's why I put my Zoom name is pretending to be art.
There you
But
go.
like she talks about like you are figure out a place in yourself where you can be the um I don't know, the maker of that meaning. Because if in a world where the cheerful nihilism side of it is you get everything matters if and you get to pick what numbers, symbols, representations, icons, words, books, movies, songs that you want to map the meaning to in your life. But like you're a DJ, you get to do it how you want.
And she does do that better than many of the others I've seen that are similar to this, where she is letting you guide your own journey. She's just telling you how to get started on it, not telling you how to end it. And so I think that's one of the valuable parts, but also why it would appeal to a wider variety of people and religions. Yeah.
It made me think of a book. I think it was like Making Your Own Religion or something, where he also is trying to like pretty
Is
much
it the Book of
say
Mormon?
like make your own philosophy, like find your own path in life. It's I trying to remember exactly, but I read that book. I think it was also good. It's some of the same ideas, like you pick the rituals that help you. You pick. He also talked about like spiritual books, and for some people it's the Bibles. For some people it's Lord of the Rings, right, or whatever it is. And he mentioned the 3 books that he uses, but he's just like, I'm not telling you to use the books I have. Um, find your own. So I think that's kind of like the same impression I got from both of them, is that they're both like, here's something I did, or here are some options, but I'm not telling you have to use any of them.
Yeah, another quote that I was just too good that I had to pull it. This is actually from chapter 2, I believe it is. She says, "Secular spirituality is the ability to confiscate the treasures of each option, in the context of a bunch of different spiritual pursuits that she listed, while resisting the temptation to get sucked into the issues of any single approach on its own. A sort of inquisition in reverse, where we steal back what religions have had a monopoly on for far too long."
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly this, right? Like reclaiming these, whatever is meaningful to you, then awesome, that's great. And because you are secular, because you understand all of these, the certain aspects of all of these different spiritual paths, then like that means it's a big buffet. Just go along, make yourself a cafeteria spiritualist instead of a cafeteria Mormon, right? Like just pick and choose what you want. Keep the most delicious morsels for yourself. That's great.
Yeah, there in chapter 2, there was another quote that I liked. It said, if there is a lie of atheism, it is that if you leave religion, people just automatically know how to be ethical, navigate relationships, form communities, raise children, orient their lives, celebrate the dead, find their core values, and live lives full of meaning that can combat suffering. The truth is in between. We are not born damned and depraved, as the Christians tell us, but we also are in need of a little help, which exactly. And I think that's why how religions keep people in is because they have that roadmap of all of those things telling you what to do, and it's much easier. And then that's one thing I've also seen in with people who have gone back after leaving, and they just say, I can't handle the loneliness of this. I have to go back. I'm going back because then my family will talk to me or whatever. And so they get that community back, even though they know every bit of it's a lie at the core, they still go back because they need the rest of it. And so that is, I think that is the problem. One of the very few problems with atheism is you don't have that type of community like you do with religion, because atheism is not a religion, no matter what religion people will say. It's just, we don't have meetings, we don't get, all that stuff. And so that's the difficult thing, is you do have to set your own path. And quite often you are totally alone on that path. But it's learning to be comfortable alone on that path is the key. Because once you are, then it's easier to find a community. Yeah.
That makes me wonder, of the 5 million everyday attending Mormons, there's a reason we have an entire demographic marker of PMOs, right? Physically in, mentally out. Those people are physically in for reasons, right? Be that family relationships, be that friends, be that coworkers, be that a job, be that this is the only community and socializing they get. Especially if they're, someone who's, works from home and is a shut-in or something like that, right? There are so many things that a religion provides us that you have to take all of the extra baggage along with the religion when you are a member of that religion. And PMOs, they are everywhere. I don't know if there is a way to track what the statistics are on this, or what percentage of Orthodox every Sunday attending Mormons are actually PMO, because I think probably the vast majority of PMOs are not self-admitted PMOs. They have the feelings, the tendencies of they have a lot of heavy shelves, but they have not yet admitted to themselves that they are mentally out, and they are just remaining physically in, right? So I'm wondering what percentage there is out there, because those people are coming back every Sunday because they're getting something out of it, and atheism does not have anything to replace that.
Right.
Yeah, I know someone who doesn't believe at all, never believed in Mormonism, but keeps going. And they go because of the community. And that's fine. That's their choice, right? And yeah, the religions know how to do community a lot better than anything else. And I think it's like what Hartley says, it's because the myths that we have outside of religion just aren't as strong.
Right.
There's a board game club I kept thinking about going to in my town, and I've gone to it once, but even though I love board games, I don't go back every single week, because I have other things going on, and because the myth of playing board games, or whatever you want to say, isn't as strong as saying the myth of God says you have to go to church every day or every Sunday, or you're going to hell, right? That myth's a lot stronger, and gets everyone to go, or a lot of people to go, even if they hate it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the older you are, the harder it is to leave too. We get a lot of teenagers leaving because everything's changing as a teenager. And so it's easier to leave then. It's easier to walk away then. But the older you are, when you realize it, you also, because this is what I went through, you also deal with a lot of those feelings of shame of, why did I believe it this long? How could I have? No, I surely didn't believe it this whole time. Or, all of those feelings. And so I think that's why we get a lot of PMOs in, is it's much harder as an adult to leave. Like I said, I was in my 40s. And that's difficult. That's really hard. And it coincided with a move to a completely different stake and ward. And so nobody knew me, so that made it easier. But the previous one, we were there for 10 years. And there's a lot of people who depended on me for all sorts of things because I talked a lot. And I don't know if I could have, well, I know I probably couldn't have, because I didn't. Even though from 2011 on, I knew it wasn't true. I just couldn't leave. I always had reasons not to go because, I was sick with something all the time. So it was just easier not to go to church, but I didn't actually leave. Yeah. So yeah, it takes a lot of strength to do that. But it also takes a lot of strength to face the truth of everything, including being hoodwinked for so long. And that's difficult.
I mean, like, go ahead, Will.
Oh, sorry. I've been like chomping at the bit to
Oh,
this. Um, like this is a great discussion. And thanks for sharing, like Aurora and Shannon. I think that what I'm gonna get these are like will tips. I guess.
excellent.
Because I've been struggling with this the whole time, and like I'm fully aware and like extremely aware of like I was raised in a certain like whatever the bubble of my consciousness was a ward community. It was my neighbors, and it was about 150 to 300 people like that. So I'm that's what I'm used to, is having a community that size raise me up. And so I think about like, oh well, what am I offering to my kids? They don't have that. And it doesn't matter what the 150 to 300 people believe. What matters is that I'm missing it. And I'm not like, this sounds super selfish, but I'm saying like I think I chase that, and that's what I never really have feelings like I should like I miss the church. But what I do is I take it and I'm like, okay, this is the thing that I had, and this is the thing that I'm now missing. I'm gonna go find it and create it in my own way. And so like I my kids got invited to this like Christian Bible study every Wednesday, and the guy makes some food. The kids play in the backyard, and like the adults like study the Bible. And so like I go and I'm like I tell them, I'm like, I'm just LARPing here, like I'm just pretending to be somebody who's like because like I mean you guys all know like I functionally can't give a belief that they would accept. Like I know what type of faith they need to accept Jesus, and I'm like I'm incapable of delivering that. And but I can talk about how exciting your narrative is, because it just happens to be the uh most prominent narrative in my bubble of life, especially when I'm going to a freaking Bible study every week. But like it's good, it's good for me because I'm there just like really enjoying the community. Like I'm not there to um disagree or anything. Anyways, it's like purely like comfort food in a weird way, because but like yeah, they every once in a while they'll like text me and they'll be like, hey, what's going on in your life, man? Like how do we get, and I'm like, that's not, you're missing the point. Um, but like that's one ritual that I've allowed myself to do. And when it doesn't work anymore, I'm not married to it. But like another one I do is I try to, this one was born out of that. I was like, man, Christians, like, because like we're reading the Bible, and I'm like, Christians, they have it all wrong. Like all you got to do is love your neighbor. That's literally it. That's just stop, full stop, love your neighbor. That's, and so like, I'm like, you just don't love your neighbor. And then I'm like, I come home and I'm like, I don't even know my neighbors. Um, I do want to know one of my my neighbor over here. His name is Godlove, which is ironic to me.
A
But
little on the nose.
yeah. Um, but this is he's from Nigeria, so it's just everyone's got awesome names from over there. But anyways, my so realizing that I don't know my neighbors really well, I started like doing a every full moon cycle, because she talks about that, using astrological signs, solstices, and things like that to set your calendar. But every full moon cycle, I ride around the neighborhood on a big wheel. It's based off of a meme. But I post it to the Facebook group, all the different communities that the thing has, and when I'm down there, I invite people to come, and we ride around, and like I always like give it a side quest, like, okay, tonight we're gonna try to do this or that, and it's like a little ritual um that you commit to. And when Aurora, you're talking about, sorry, this is such a long setup for what I wanted to tell you, Aurora, but when you're talking about like the board gaming thing, um like don't be afraid to like put color on the connections that you have with the people. It's not board gaming. It's, you know, Alex and, you know, Jennifer and whatever, like the people that are actually showing up to your board game thing. Build a little mini Dungeons and Dragons style narrative around that. And like you can joke about it, you know, like if you don't show up 1 week, you're in hell until you come back, you know, like, or whatever, you know, it's like I've really benefited from creating these types of rituals in my life, and I like the ones that I have offline, and I've struggled to build them online. I mean, this is one of my rituals to come into the Patreon show, but you know, it's not religious for any of you guys, but it's like in a way, it's like a routine, consistent thing that I set an intention to do, and then you know just provide a little bit of structure. To me, these are like I mean, you can build whatever you want around the ritual. She talks about that. Anyways,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to give some practical, these are Will tips of, you can find that community of 300, 500, 1,000 anywhere, but you have, that's what the cool thing about Bryce explaining exactly how Joseph Smith did it is that like, not that you want to follow the way Joseph Smith did it, but you know, you can build out your own little, you know, universe. And as long as you're not crossing the line and fucking with people's well-beings in any sort, you can just, the narrative part of it is really fun for me of you know, we're riding around the neighborhood on big wheels, like it's like we're circling our castle, you know, our land, you know, and like, but that, you know, it's, everyone has to be able to bring whatever they want to bring, and if you put rules around what you can and can't bring, that's where all the trouble gets started. So yeah, this is my tip on creating rituals and how it's benefited me. The end.
Excellent. Well done.
I don't want to intentionally, as I am setting this up, as I am doing exactly that, I don't want to intentionally do this. But Roy, you've kind of been silent throughout the whole conversation and the discussion here, and I'm curious, you know, regardless of having read the book or not, throughout all of the discussions and everything, you know, what are your takeaways? Roy, do you have any rituals that you do that are part of this ritualistic process, or like, you know, what are kind of your thoughts about this whole conversation? I think you're still muted. Okay, there we go.
There. No, I'm hearing people talk about rituals, and I mean, we've got traditions, family traditions, nothing really deliberate to replace religion. Now, I have talked to people that have done this Sunday assembly thing. And I looked when my wife and I first started realizing we no longer could go to church. We looked to see if there were any locally. I'm told that some of the Sunday assembly groups that thrive are in Utah, actually. So I'm a little envious. I'm in rural Alabama, and it's hard to find. Not only are there very few Exmos, but there are very few atheists that will at least openly identify in this very Bible Belt area. The one guy that I ever worked with that openly declared himself an atheist, and this was before I mentally left religion, he was just so completely ostracized at work. It was shocking to see how a bunch of supposedly rational grown-ups treated the one token atheist. But I do kind of get missing community. And I reached out actually to the guy I just mentioned, said, is there any kind of weekly get up or anything, any get together group, especially because my kids, I had a lot of kids that were home still, and I kind of wanted them to be able to associate with like-minded people. But no, there's not a thriving community of that nature here in this area that I've been able to find. I do miss the community a little bit. But as far as deliberately creating rituals, I'm now intrigued by the book that I confess I have not read, but now a little bit too late. I think I will read it. I will say this. Do we crave religion? I mean, some people really seem to. I've become such a skeptic, but I have found a certain benefit in Stoicism, reading like people like Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus or Seneca and so on. So I guess part of me still craves moral guidance or just reading things from time to time that help me maybe try to be a little bit better. But for the most part, I don't miss religion. Like I say, I miss a little bit of the community. I actually feel more sorry for my kids. It was a big hit to their social life when they stopped going to the LDS Scout Troop and the LDS young adult activities and stuff like that. But I don't know.
Yeah.
We're still searching. Maybe someday I'll move out of rural Alabama and go to an area where there's more of a community of like-minded people. But it's a rambling answer, but I guess the short answer is no. I really haven't tried to create a lot of rituals to replace what I left when I left the church.
That makes sense.
I mean,
That reminds me of one person I know who did leave the church as a teenager, and now they're in their 20s, and they actually will go with their spouse to a Catholic church, and they find peace there in the rituals of a mass at Catholic mass. And it's never something they felt in the Mormon church. They don't want to join it. They just feel peaceful there, attending the mass. And I found that rather interesting, because they don't like organized religion at all, and don't believe any religions are true, but it's that peaceful feeling they get there. And so, yeah, it's something I had never really thought about in this context until reading this book. But yeah. Huh.
Yeah, I've got to a lot of other churches, and I guess I always approach it from maybe an intellectual thing of, oh, it's interesting. But what I find, I'll tell you, one of the biggest things to me was the comfort I found in prayer. And so many times I testified of receiving answers to prayer and just an overwhelming feeling of peace. And within a couple of weeks of starting to read books that made me question the gospel narrative, that feeling I got from prayer utterly vanished. It vanished so quickly that I was just amazed. I remember just praying in a private room for hours, maybe 4 or 5 hours, literally just crying and pleading to God for something and being so utterly amazed that I just realized I'm talking to the couch. I don't know, for some reason, losing just the minute that I realized it's not true, I never could find any comfort in the ritual of prayer. And I get where it's kind of, I talk to myself, but I do know that it's just myself talking back. And I do think it's helpful to talk things out loud. But I don't know. I've never been able to recreate that peace that I found when I was a believer. So, I went to Catholic mass because of a funeral, and it was very interesting. This was recent, but I tell you, it just leaves me very intellectually somewhat interested, but emotionally, I'm dead inside when it comes to religion, at least. I don't know. It doesn't resonate with me. Every now and then I run into somebody that's left the church and gone to another church, but my own personal experience, and I wonder if somebody is studying this, but my personal experience at talking to other people who've left, doesn't it seem like the majority of people who walked away from Mormonism walk away from religion completely? I've got a friend of mine who's a former Baptist minister who's converted to Mormonism. So, but he said one of the reasons he didn't want to try to convince Mormons, when he was a Baptist minister, he felt like if you're converting somebody out of Mormonism, you're leading them to atheism, because his experience was when people leave Mormonisms, most of them become diehard skeptics. Now, I have no way of proving that, but certainly within my small circle of ex-Mormon friends, that seems to be true. So I don't know. I'm intrigued by people, though, that go from this type of crazy to another type of crazy. Not for me, though.
I think I'll just add into that. My observations are that Mormonism has a total scorched earth policy when it comes to any other forms of spiritualism. I mean, it's right in our scriptures that, all of their professors are corrupt and they speak evil, right? So when it's like Mormonism or nothing, when you realize Mormonism isn't the thing, then it's like it's a very easy step into the nothing, because that's what you've been taught your whole life. So I think that is extremely prevalent, but I think that also has the downwind effect of forcing a lot of ex-Mormons to jettison any forms of spirituality, which I think is why this book positions itself very beneficially, to an ex-Mormon audience, a former Mormon audience, because that is likely a large demographic of people who have gone over to atheism, who see no benefits whatsoever in any forms of spirituality, it's like, hey, look, there's actually something here for everybody. If you want, you can check this out. Like you can still be an atheist and a hard skeptic and still have fun with numerology. That's fine. That's cool. And I think, well, that is also to say that like Hartley doesn't make this point, but this is the point that I'm making, that like having that total scorched earth policy and denigrating all other forms of spiritualism is a massive disservice to the Mormon population themselves. And creating that Mormon to atheist pipeline means that there are a lot of stops along the way that a lot of Mormons never stop at. They just take the pipeline straight to nihilism, straight to atheism, straight to other isms that generally don't have any form of spiritualism, anything that has like any ritualistic behaviors in it. Because like we're pattern individuals, we're patternistic species. Doing patterns is what makes us comfortable. When someone tells us a joke, a 3-part joke, and the one is establishing, the premise, 2 is establishing the pattern, then the 3 is the rejection of the pattern and the premise. And that's because we're pattern-seeking individuals. We know how things are supposed to go. Then you upset our expectations, and that's where the humor comes from, right? So like, these are things that are instinctual. These are things that are inherent, that are built into our psychology long before language, long before social structures, long before any government structures. Ritualism is something that humans have been doing for, probably before we even figured out how to harness fire. So like, to say that there's nothing of value here, I think is kind of to dismiss that entire history of Homo sapien and its practicing, or of other hominid species, on their practicing of these ritualisms, because they clearly got something out of it. Because we are where we are today, arguably because we establish these patterns, we understand patterns, we seek to manipulate patterns, and we even see patterns that aren't actually there, and that's where God comes from, right? So yeah.
Well,
I don't
and
know.
you also have the issue of ritual is not always seen as a good thing. I mean, ritual is often tied to devil worship, to witchcraft, to all of that, that you have these rituals for how you do things.
The
And
great and
yes,
abominable church.
yeah, exactly. You have it with religion, but rituals really do apply to everything. I mean, I have a ritual every morning of how I deal with the morning. I get up, I weigh myself, I check my blood sugar, check my blood pressure, go make my coffee, sit down, get all of my 11 pills out for the day, and I drink my coffee and I read a book the entire time I'm doing it. I don't get on my phone until after I'm done with breakfast, because that's my ritual, is I'm reading, or whatever. That I do that exactly that way every morning. And that is a ritual, and that is a good thing. And it makes me feel all right to start my day reading rather than on my phone or whatever. So I think that's part of the problem as well with people leaving religion, is you kind of feel like ritual is a bad thing. You don't understand how ritual works, that it is just a generic term for something you do repeatedly. And so understanding that it's okay to need one, it's okay to have one, it's okay to create one. And you find the ones that make you feel safe, that make you feel comfortable. If it means a type of religious thing, if it means a tarot card, if it means, numerology, whatever it means, if it means sitting there reading a Jaff book, then that's what you do, because that's what makes you feel comfortable, feel safe, feel normal. And so, yeah, we can replace them. And it's those people in the religion we leave try to tell you that your replacement is a bad thing, but that's because they don't understand what the need is. And so, yeah, I think she pointed that out really well.
Yeah, she did say that there is something about religion that's ingrained. We do need like something to come together and like celebrate life, celebrate death, and all that.
Yeah.
That is like, we're hardwired to need that.
We are. And it's religions I feel like she says the religions were created to use that rather than these were created for religion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people go to religion or when somebody dies, when somebody gets born,
Yeah.
all these things.
And I liked what she talked about her experience with adopting her children and how with the first one able to be sealed in the temple and
Yeah.
everything and the feeling she got from that and how it bothered her not to be able to do it with the others.
Yeah, she needed that community, that ritual
Yeah.
of celebrating that child into her home that she didn't
Right.
get when she left. Yeah.
Which that was a description I'd never heard before of getting a child, an adopted child sealed. But I liked how she stated it, where this child is being accepted into the community. And I was like, that was actually a really good way to put it because I hadn't thought of it that way before, anything with the temple before. And to hear it said that way, I was like, okay, that's why it was valuable to her. Even now, out of the church, kicked out, the whole 9 yards. That mattered because of the ritual aspect of acceptance. Right.
Yeah, that made me, when she was talking about that, it made me think of, because I have decided that when I have children, I want to do like a form of a baby blessing for whatever reason. And I want to do it. And I wonder like how my family and extended family will react to that, because it's not going to be the Mormon baby blessing. And I'm the one who plans to do it, and just to,
Yes.
And so I'm just like, I wonder, like, if my husband or my partner wants to be involved too, then obviously I'm going to do that too. But I just wonder, because she said like she wanted some type of ritual to welcome her new child, but yet no one would travel that distance to be part of it. I think that's a little sad. So
It is. It is.
Well, if we can, I mean, just briefly discuss kind of like the psychological underpinnings of that, right? Like acceptance into a community is acceptance of you, for who you are, for what you're doing. Like you are doing something the community likes, therefore the community accepts you. And whether that is having a kid and bringing a kid into this community, bearing a kid or whatever the case is, or if it's you got, in our context, you got a calling that is revered in the community, then suddenly the community likes you and shows appreciation for your dedication, for your service to the community, whatever the case is, right? How much that is instinctual of like, this community accepts me. That way, when the wolves come in the night, a bunch of people got my back. I got their back, they got my back. That is very instinctual. To be part of a community, it is a survival mechanism. And like, yeah, and like Hartley makes no bones about it that like religions have co-opted that sense of community, like that, and how instinctual that is, that they have created all of these rituals around these things. And oftentimes like the end effects of that are suppression of people and like the bad effects that spiritualism and religion creates, and oftentimes jettisoning or devaluing, I guess, the more ritualistic aspects that the people are there for to begin with, the other community aspects that people are there to begin with, right? I'm reminded of the video we watched for the movie we watched for this episode was The Last Temptation of Christ, right? And in it we see essentially that Jesus goes and makes an entire community of people, and these people adore Jesus. They throw parties when he is, planning a protest coming into the temple. He didn't feel like he belonged anywhere, so he started speaking his truths and created a community of followers that then appreciated him and that then did everything that they could to follow him. In which case, it's like this is not only serving his survival mechanisms of like, somebody's going to have my back when the wolves come in the night, but also I need resources. If I just talk, people will give me resources. And like how much that like religion is basically co-opting and preying off of our instinctual tendencies. That's kind of the tangentially points were made throughout the book that kind of allude to that. I don't think she ever hit it as on the nose as I just now did, but that I think that is an overall takeaway that I was able to pull from the book that I think is also beneficial. Like it's all about reclaiming these things, like taking what have been taken out of or have been weaponized against us as pattern seeking, as community seeking social species, and reclaiming them, making them our own, and taking parts from a bunch of different spiritualisms to make what makes us comfortable, makes us happy.
Yeah. And recognizing also that religions aren't all bad, because there's many good things on the earth today that came from religion, art that we have, music that we have, books that we have, all sorts of things like that. There's been a huge amount in our cultures and everything else that came from religion. But that doesn't mean it's all good either. And so it's recognizing that, it's like with when we talk about the community and rituals and everything, they co-opt it in such a way to say, you can't have it without us, so you must stay to have this. These are all just basic human needs. And we do grow up thinking we have to be in the religion to have those. And that is wrong. That is very wrong. And so that's one of the biggest things I think I also got from her is understanding that those things came before religion came. And so understanding that they're just leeching off of it for their own purposes makes it easier to walk away. Yeah.
It always turns out into that. Like that's the path that it always goes. Like
Yeah.
You can watch a bajillion cult documentaries or or just look at the ones today, but like if it ever gets too big, it always is exploitative.
Yep.
Another couple of points, as there were the chapter on awakening the feminine. I loved. I think that was like a crowning jewel of this book, and also because I think Hartley took such great pains to authentically represent the male experience as a woman writer, a woman philosopher and theologian writing. A lot of the book it seems like it was geared towards a woman audience, but there's also, I felt like, accurate and apt male representation or man's representation within this. And in the chapter specifically on awakening the feminine, I just want to bring in these two different quotes that talk about the two kind of dichotomous experiences within religions, because, right, like the vast majority of religions are patriarchal and are very sexist against women. And that's obviously a massive issue. And she spends a lot of time on that, and it's fantastic. And she also shows how much men are victimized by these patriarchal institutions as well. So these two quotes from the Awakening the Feminine chapter. The first one is, I also just love the way that she writes about this too. Like, this is one of my favorite quotes from the entire book. She says, most of the spiritual books that have influenced us were written by men in societies where women were not included. You've been programmed by a lot of dead men who have no idea what it is to be a woman. It's like, mwah, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful sentence. I love it. Thank you. She goes on to say, women are learning to resacralize our ordinary embodied experience. We are no longer willing to wait for invitations from men's ancient elite clubs. And like, I love that, like, empowerment and the voice that she is using to write about this, and the way that, like, she reveals how damaging these patriarchal institutions are to women. And then there's also this addition of the male experience in here and how damaging it is just to society as a whole, regardless of gender. She says, however, what I can say is that something happened when God the female, God the many, and God the abundant became God the male, God the jealous, God the singular, and God the conqueror. Part of reawakening spirituality in modern society is understanding all that we lost in the shift, grieving it, and even being angry because of it. This includes what patriarchy does to men and the rise of male loneliness epidemic as we lose our communal bonds and connection to nature. So I just feel like those two quotes from different portions of that chapter kind of put together like represent the dichotomous but similar nature that we experience as multiple genders within these institutions that are created by men for men about men with, that are, pedestalizing men and keeping them at the highest forms of government and leadership positions and everything like that, that everybody is harmed by these institutions being structured the way that they are. And there's so many more passages I could read out of the book that capture that same thing, but I thought that those were two really representative quotes.
Very much, yeah.
And there's definitely things in Mormonism that you could tell, yeah, women were never a part of that.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. And unfortunately does not apply just to Mormonism too.
No, it does
a lot
not.
of structures. So
yeah, she made that point quite clearly.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's only a couple religions where women are treated equally. There's out of 270 million of them. Yeah. I don't know how many there are.
I mean, I love how you expanded the 27 there.
Yeah, I was going to say that. You got to
27 gets expanded so many ways with me. The only time it's for real is when I say it's actually, yes, almost never happens, but always makes my day when it does.
The 27 rarely happens.
I know. Last episode was really fun. I was like, 27 pages in for real. Yes. It took him 27 fucking pages to get to his point. Yeah. Anyway. All right.
Oh, amazing.
Oh, God. Yes.
So yeah, we're cracking pretty close to our 2-hour regular time limit. I want to open up to the panel. Concluding thoughts. Anything about this book that we should discuss that we did not discuss? Just opening it up.
That's the key. Is I think we all discussed everything we wanted to discuss.
I think so, yeah.
I have a thought. I can always come up with thoughts, right?
Of course.
Excellent.
I keep my content diet with like I'll watch stuff that I don't agree with and pay attention to what they're saying just so that I can keep a mind of what is being spoken about. And there's a lot of talk about this kind of expectation that like religious thought leaders and like they're non-believers too, like they believe as much in God as we do, but they're just like on this side that's like, oh, there's a blue church, there's a woke church, there's a like they want to like create this narrative of this I don't know, I'm trying to think of like these are like the Jordan Peterson type discourse. Okay, that's probably the easiest way to say it. And like the guy doesn't believe, like he believes in it less than than anyone thinks he does, but he's performing it out there, but they put this message out there that like they're expecting people to like finally get it and come back to religion. And where I've been at for the past, I don't know, a couple years is like, if it's coming, like if people are going to come back, they're going to just hijack it because they know how, when you spend enough time online and watching just how the world is playing out, and then you go to, plug into your normal life and go to work and go to school and stuff like that, and you just interact with people, it's like you learn how and she talks about it in the book about how it's just like the Matrix is just a game or whatever. But like, yeah, if there's any hope that they have that like there's going to be like a scattering and gathering or whatever, it's like, as if there are other parents out there like me who are ex-Mormon and kind of trying to figure out what to do with their kids, like if they would just like, I mean, I go to church. I go to church once a year, and I go uh when they have the children's primary thing, because I want them to see that like um uh, I don't know, I like, I want them to see that like there's a different way to believe, like that there's um that they're in charge of like shaping the church, that gets grown when they grow up, you know. And if they you know, there's this quote by President Uchtdorf where he talked about how like the church is like the world moves this way and then we follow, and then like the world moves this way and we follow. And I was like, you just gave away the game. Like you guys are just saying that like you're gonna follow us no matter what we do. And so I just say like, if you have any hope or expectation that people are gonna come back to church, these religious nuns, which I've been a nun for, I don't know, probably 15 years now. I mean, I was PMO for a lot of that, but um, if they're coming back, they're just gonna change it to make it way different. Like I don't think people, there's, tradition is not uh unless we're gonna have fun with it. I feel like speaking from my own millennial voice of whatever type of people have similar you know, experiences as I do, like we just say like we, you know, we'll take it and make it how we want to. And so I guess my thing is I don't know if the SCMC watches this or whatever. My thing is like, this isn't a book club saying like we're coming back or we figured out that religion makes sense. It's more like we're coming to take it over. Like we, if anybody, and I'm not saying we really are, but like I'm pretending to be art here. Okay, just give me this space. I appreciate it. Anyways, what I'm saying is, you know, this is you know, we don't live in a time like we used to before any of this, and things are going to change, and you just got to get used to it. And I think we're all trying to find our own path, and you know, a book like this is something that can help me, because it tells me my story a little bit that I hardly, or not hard, but like hardly, I meant it resonates very closely. And then, but it also gives me the tools to realize like, oh, I can um uh, being content with my own lot in life, I can make it more meaningful. And I really appreciate a book like this. And thank you, Aurora, for suggesting it, because it's legit.
Seconded. Thank you, Aurora. This was an awesome suggestion. Brittney Hartley, it's called No Nonsense Spirituality, All the Tools, No Belief Required. Fantastic book. This was an absolute pleasure for me to read. I enjoyed this so much. Yeah, this was great. And I think actually a really great way to start kind of the book club of the Patreon hangouts. You know, this felt like a really good launch board to explore other titles of fiction or nonfiction in this space and kind of see what divine truths can we pull from these things. And I apologize to my panelists as well as anybody watching, but apparently there's a cicada outside of my window that has decided to be extremely angry over these last 2 minutes. Very, very mad about something. But yeah, in any case, does anyone have any concluding remarks they want to throw in there before we shut up the stream for the evening?
It was great seeing all of you, whoever was able to be here. Yeah, you guys, as well as those in the YouTube chat. That's been fun. It's always fun to see how we connect. And yes, we may not do this every time, but we will do more of these. And it'll be fun. It'll be a lot of fun. And we'll take suggestions from people on books. Though occasionally I might say, hey, we're going to do this. That has nothing to do with religion. At all, in any way, shape, or form.
We'll have to do a Jaff, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies book club next time.
That would be fun. That would actually be super fun, because that book is
around
so
October, right?
Funny. It is so
fun, yeah.
It is hilarious. It is. Oh God, it's
The
one
movie
of
is
my most
great
favorite.
too.
The movie is hilarious as well, and it's all its own hilariousness. The book, God, the book. Yeah. Anyway, all right.
Excellent. All right. Well, that'll
Shannon
be for the
could go for
future.
the next 5 hours on
Yeah.
that. We will not. I will not do that to you guys.
We'll leave that for an actual episode of the show. And for me as well, thank you all of the panelists, viewers, as well as our patrons who are listening to this after the fact or watching this in the backlogs or wherever. Whoever you are, thanks for attending with us. And
Yes.
we hope to see you on the next one, or you know, if you want to join us. And if not, that's totally cool as well. Like, we're just here having fun hosting these panel discussions because we like spending time with all y'all and we appreciate your support. And this is a small way that we can express that gratitude. And well, shit, it's just fun. I
Yeah.
had just a ton of fun tonight. So thank you all
Definitely.
again. This was an absolute pleasure.
Yes. It was good to see y'all. Good night, everybody.
I'll see ya.
Okay.